When we're talking about sampling and organising samples, one of the most crucial things you can do is move beyond managing them in Mac Finder or in Windows folders and employ the help of an actual sample manager.
Hello there, I'm Eve, and I will be your sample manager for the day. Please just sit back, relax, and let me sort away.
Workflow is so important in this day and age, and making the process of gathering, organising and actually using samples more efficient helps you way more than you think in the production of a tune. Most of all, it stops you having that god-awful question of where do I go or what do I add next, as you have an amazing library of sounds ready to dive into. One other reason to use a sample manager, aside from all the obvious things, is that you can have one file on your hard drive and then link it to multiple playlists in your sample manager, and this allows you to use all the strategies I'm about to show you and never run into those annoying file problems where you've moved a file and it's been corrupted in a project, and it just makes the whole process a lot more efficient. It's actually pretty hard to say what is the definitive best sample manager out there today, as there is a bunch of great options available to us. Some tools like Ableton have great file browsers built into them and can be very useful in themselves. Other great options include Sonoman and Sampleism, as well as ADSR, which is a fantastic free option. Audio Finder is undoubtedly my favourite, and even though it's been largely abandoned by the owners, which is quite sad at this point, it still works. I'm on Monterey, it still works fine for me, and I think up to the current versions of Mac it's still working okay, but it's not receiving any updates or anything like that. But it still stands head and shoulders above the rest for me, and there are a few crucial features which I'll get into of why I love Audio Finder so much. It has an amazing Spotlight search function where, just like Spotlight search works on your Mac where you can search it here, you can essentially search the Spotlight search, but it's only going to find the audio files. So I can just type in kick here and it's going to search my whole library. You can add your external hard disks and everything to this, and so it's searching kick and it's found 28,000 kicks, which is an extortionate amount of kicks, and I would never be able to go through all of these manually. But one thing you can do is you can search for a file name and then you can click in. So I'm hearing these kicks now, and then I can press the star button and I can randomly shuffle this whole searched Spotlight search playlist of kicks in this instance, but any sample you want. It also has this amazing function where I can make a clip out of any waveform, so I can select a part of it just to demo that part of the waveform or the file, and then I can hold control and click and drag this out. So I could drag this into my DAW if I wanted to, or just drop it into Finder there. But another thing you can do is come into options and go MIDI input device, and I can set up my my Arturia keyboard here, and if I turn on MIDI in this area, I can then play this sample up and down the MIDI keyboard. And so it's a really good way, especially if you're doing sample based music like in jungle or hip hop, you can really test the samples at different pitches whilst listening to a beat in your DAW. And I don't know any other sample managers that have either this Spotlight function or this MIDI keyboard kind of clip playing function. So both of them are unique to Audio Finder by my knowledge, and really amazing features. One final thing I really love about Audio Finder is actually being able to use emojis and colours to visually show, and actually images from the internet to visually represent these folders. And in this program you essentially have these sidebar groups, which are drop downs, and then inside the sidebar groups you have your playlist. So it's quite a simple file organizing structure there. But here I can come and press info, and I can drag any picture from the internet to be the little icon, and I can also color up the title of the list, and then I can also obviously add emojis at the end of it. And this might seem like quite a simple thing, but when you have a big amount of playlists like I do here, I have loads of playlists. When I'm scrolling through this, having these certain groups and lists jump out at me is actually really important. So it's a little thing, but it actually makes a big difference in something you're using all the time. One other amazing feature inside Audio Finder is I can actually double click any file, and it will open up in my audio editor, and this is Twisted Wave, which is an amazing audio editor. And if I just copy this into a new file so I can show you, I can put fades in, I can put markers in everywhere, I could actually add processes to different chunks of this, so I could EQ a little bit of it, or get rid of a weird resonance or something like that. And then I actually have the options, I can save this as a new file, or I can destructively save over the original file location. So it becomes a really powerful sort of partnership between these two programs, and in my head I've combined the best audio editor in Twisted Wave with the best sample manager in Audio Finder for a really efficient workflow.
2, 1, boost ignition, and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Discovery, returning to the space station.
Okay, so how do I actually organize samples? And this may seem like such a simple question in this day and age where we've all been using playlists on our iPhones for the last 10 years, but there is actually a bunch of useful information I can give here. Most people will organize their samples by simply leaving them in the sample packs or the downloads they got them from. And whilst this is fine, I think there are actually a bunch of better and more efficient methods we can use to organize our samples. Organizing by a specific element or tag is generally much more efficient than having everything spread out over sample packs, because if I want to find a hi-hat, I just come to the playlist enabled hi-hats, and everything is there, so it creates a much more streamlined thought process between what you want and where you're finding it. Now, the real benefit about doing this in a sample manager is, even though all these hi-hats are in one playlist here, if I actually open them, I can go right click on this hi-hat and open it in Finder. They're all going to be in different locations in my Finder. So this is from my MPC collections, but if I come somewhere like this, it's going to be in another location. And so that's one of the great things about these sample managers, is all these hi-hats are in different locations on my hard drive, but they're just in one playlist in my sample manager. I also really like organizing by genre, and in this instance you can see I've got all my house and garage samples in one set, I've got all my hip hop samples in one area, and this doesn't mean you can't use samples from one genre in another. Samples are very rarely genre specific. It does help when you're wanting to create a specific style or look for a specific style of sample, to locate a bunch of playlists in the same genre. One of my favorite techniques is to create a playlist for a specific track or song, and just like a DJ would make a playlist of tunes that will work well together to play out, we can do the same for our music. And often this starts with me being inspired by something I found online or ripped from a record, or even referencing a tune I really like and then building a whole bunch of sounds, kind of diving into my own library here and collecting a whole bunch of similar sounds that will fit the style or vibe or theme that I'm going for with that tune. This not only helps with your ear training, as you're really focusing on just the sample process and finding lots of sounds that work together, but also often starts the creative process as you get inspired by things and you start to see the creative vision of where the song will go before you've even started writing it. This is actually a tried and tested practice in hip hop, where artists like Dilla would sample a bunch of different records, actually just sit there, listen to an album or a few albums and make notes of timestamps of all the little pieces they wanted to chop out, then go through the sampling process, sample all those little elements and put them in a bank or 16 chops on the MPC, and then make the tune. And I think it's so valuable. You can see the way you split these two processes up, and then you really dial in on the sounds before you even get to the production process.
Go up to the turntable with a stack of records, put the headphones on, and he go through some joints, do needle drops, whatever, find some shit, and he take the headphones off and he just started nodding, and you could just see the whole shit forming in his head. You know what I'm saying? The joint, he had the joint done before the MP was even turned on.
A good example of this is a playlist I made for a song a while back actually. I did this sort of breaky 156 BPM track. And in this playlist I have some references of songs I want to capture the vibe to, or hit a similar theme to. Maybe I was referencing the mix of them. And then I have lots of samples of different varieties. So you can see I've got an RP thing here, I've got a Rhodes chord.
When they walk back, they sing.
I've got some vocal stuff here. I've got a ride, some bongos. So I'm really trying to tick all the boxes of, like, have I got effects in it? Have I got percussion? Have I got some drum breaks? And rather than having lots of similar samples, I'm trying to spread them out to sort of tick all the boxes. Now, what I've also got is only about 50 items in here, and I would say somewhere between 50 and 100 is probably the ideal size for one of these playlists. Otherwise, it sort of defeats the point and you overburden yourself and you give yourself too many options. So you want to keep the size of the playlist fairly small and put yourself in a bit of a creative box in that sense, but then have lots of elements of different types in them. Probably the most important thing I really want to reiterate here is to do the sample managing and organizing in a different session to your production sessions. And when you're producing, you want to be creative as possible and really let that flow, and you never want to be rummaging around trying to find sounds. And so the whole idea for this is to facilitate the creativity of your production sessions by doing your sample managing in different sessions to your production. As well as playlisting for projects like I just showed you and organising by tag and genre, there are a few other sample managing tips I want to share with you. One thing is to be really specific, and this is something I do more and more of now, and I see the value in it. Before, if I come to my breaks section maybe up here, before I just had D&B drum breaks and maybe some of the custom drum breaks I've made, whereas now I've spread this out over sort of 15 lists. And this is really for my brain. When I think I want to have a more drum funk style drum break, I'll come into all these ones which I've put in here. Or if I want more rolling style breaks, I can come into this section. Or if I want a classic break, I can come into this one. So it's really about how you're combining your thought process of what you're looking for and then making that really easy to find in your sample manager. Another amazing technique I actually explored in my Todd Edwards video I did a while ago, so I'd recommend checking that out if you want to learn more about this. But what you essentially do is go through a whole bunch of different tracks and records and chop out all the best bits of them. So if I jump into, open this in Twisted Wave, you can see I've come through and selected specific slices. So I obviously like that sound. If I come to like another part of the record, so I've gone through this whole album actually, it looks like, which is one waveform, and picked out all my favourite pieces for it. What I then do is organise all of those pieces in this thing I call mega sample chops, and I rate all of them out of 5 stars. Now the whole point of this technique is I can then order this list of all these little pieces of different records to give me my top tier of all these little chunks of different records. So when you combine them all, for hip hop, for UK garage, for jungle, you get so many interesting results. And this is actually something I do for my patrons every month. For my top tier of patron, I basically give them the sampling sessions I do of that month, so they can build up their own library like this. But I dive into this all the time, and it's such an amazing resource and maybe a bit more of an experimental sampling kind of trick, but a really valuable one nonetheless. One further point to make on this is that it's much more valuable to have little slices or chunks of records than to be faced with the whole waveform you've then got to slice up in a project. And so even if you don't go through the process I've done of chopping out all the best bits you want, maybe you just take the intro as one section, or the breakdown, there's something interesting happening in a record, and save that to a new file. Or in Audio Finder, I can just load a file and sort of clip out the best bits I want, and then drag these. I can hold control and drag this to a new playlist. So I'll do that all the time. If I hear a little section of a song I want, I don't want to have to listen and scan the whole song. I just want that bit that's the kind of the most important sample in the whole track. One thing I've always really loved about sample managing is the idea of stacking up your armory or filling up your ark ready for this big adventure that is music production. And for me, the longer I produce, this becomes more and more about using my own custom sounds and bits of sound design in my projects. If I jump into my playlist here, you can see the way I'm rating everything, and the most important thing for me is actually being able to downvote things that I don't think is good enough, and obviously upvote things you do think and you do want to use all the time. And without having a rating system, which you don't have in Finder or in Windows kind of folders, I just don't see how it's possible to push all the best sounds or all your best work to the top. And for me, I take great satisfaction. I made this growl bass the other day, which I know I'm going to use all the time on my tracks. And so I love now, I think it really reinforces this idea of building up all your own sounds in the way that you can organize them in a sample manager. The final thing to touch on is where to actually get these samples from, and obviously the internet is an absolute goldmine for all of this stuff. So, you know, some people ask me, like, where do you get samples from? And I'm like, it's all there. It's like out there on the internet. You just have to get your pickaxe out and start digging. So Tracklib, I'm not subscribed to it at the moment because I dive in and out at different points. But I found some amazing, especially library music on Tracklib. There's loads of stuff here, and actually inspiring yourself by finding artists on Tracklib and then looking for them through Discogs or through YouTube is a great way of finding more unknown artists. So it kind of points you in lots of different directions you never would usually find. Actually, this Reddit drum kits place, it's got a lot of recycled garbage on here, but if you just want some drum sounds or some general kind of filler sounds, percussion stuff, there's lots of good stuff in this drum kits area. Now, of course, YouTube is amazing, and I take so much stuff off YouTube, but some people, obviously there's the sounds on YouTube, the audio is being compressed, and some people have a real problem with this, and they're very particular about wanting to only sample records or only have WAV copies. But I actually think for a lot of stuff, especially if it's not if it's not like the main sound in your track, if it's just a filler sound or a sound in the background, you're never going to notice the compression artifacts in YouTube. And I don't actually care too much about them anyway, because I think our ears, we're all listening to Spotify all the time, and obviously YouTube all the time, and radio, and all of these sound sources are not super high quality or super high fidelity, so you don't really notice a lot of the time. Maybe some people do, but I think there's a lot of like overhype about not using samples from YouTube, and I would just go for it and see what you can hear. And if you can't hear any artifacts, then there probably aren't any that anyone else is going to be able to hear. So this one, Andre Navarro II, has some amazing soul samples, so I will dive into this playlist all the time and go from popular or just search through it. Soulhawk is another amazing one with loads of great stuff in it. I think there's some good playlists in here, so I'll dive into the playlist on Soulhawk. And then Armando Drum Breaks is full of all the classic breaks, so this is a good place to get them. Another great place is actually Rhythm Lab, the break beats. If you're just looking for high quality breaks, this is probably the best place to get them. And if you search well enough in Reddit or in Google, sometimes you can find someone that's actually just got one link of all the WAVs or all the Rex files you can download in one go. So you have to do a bit of hunting for that. And then another place is actually all these forums. So Dogs on Acid, you can dive in here, and there's lots of samples in this kind of archive, and there's some break samples in here. Discord, there's loads of Discords I'm now a member to that do something like this. Mad Labs has a sample swap. So get yourself in some Discords with like-minded people and share sounds that you like, you know. And then finally, this one is a bit of a goldmine, and these old sample CDs from the 90s, there's amazing stuff on them. There's actually so much in here that you would never be able to listen. You spend the rest of your life clicking through sounds if you downloaded them all. But this is a really good website. You can kind of get all these old 90s sample CDs that aren't around anymore. And yeah, like, I think out of all of these things, still YouTube is probably my most used resource of where I find and take samples from. So just get out there and start mining, really. Yeah, give it your best shot, and I hope this has been a useful dive into all of my sampling practices and the way I use my sample manager. Hopefully will give you some good things you can bring into your own workflows. So that's really all for me today, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.